what's up? It's your boy Rawk again. Damn it! The whole world's still on lockdown, which means I'm still stuck in my room. It's weird. This is all I did anyways, but now I have a sudden urge to do, well, anything but be here. I'm like a child. You tell me to do something I was already planning on doing and suddenly f*** you can't control me. I've decided that when this whole fiasco's over, I'm gonna do the unthinkable. Leave my room. But before then, I think it'd be wise to prepare. I'm entering uncharted territory here. Seriously, I have no f***ing clue what's out there. So some light research on what I might find certainly won't hurt. Alright, Google has provided me a list of things that I might discover in the outside world. Let's see what we got. Grass, trees, other people, park? Well, what the f*** is one of those? My research has concluded that I'm definitely going to stumble across a park, which is frightening, to say the very least. There's gotta be some way I can train for my encounter with one. Preferably something that can be done from the comfort of right here. PokéPark Wii, an odd little treasure that was released way back on the 5th of December 2009. Can you guess what platform it was on? This is a bit of an odd game, all things considered, but before we go any further, just know that this is coming from your local completionist of all things not mainline Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, I love Pokemon and massively respect the franchise. I've just never enjoyed a mainline entry to the extent that I've beaten the campaign. With the exception of... get your pitchforks ready. Sword and Shield. I can feel the burning hatred from you all. It fuels me. Back to the point though, PokéPark Wii certainly stands out among the Pokemon spin-off games. Quick, tell me the two main mechanics of mainline Pokemon, and if you say hide and seek, I will f***ing lose it. I guess that's close enough. Turn-based battles and catching Pokemon are the two focal mechanics that the entire series is based on. And would you like to guess how they're implemented into this game? They aren't. Okay, that's a slight hyperbole, but before we find out how these mechanics are implemented into this game, let's take a gander at the story. Because the first thing I think of when I see this collection of characters is story. Our adventure begins in the fantastical land of lazy rendering, where we meet our protagonists. Pikachu, Charmander, Piplup and Chikorita are the heroes of this tale, and it isn't long before we are greeted by Mew. Hey guys, check this shit. Ready? Boom.
You guys say Colorado!
In either an act of stupidity or attempted murder, Pikachu is sent plummeting into the abyss. The rest of the gang follow suit and we are greeted by a bird's eye view of their destination. Pikachu is greeted once again by Mew in a dream. Mew tells Pikachu of the sky prism that has shattered, and the pieces that have scattered amongst the Poképark. If the prism pieces aren't collected and restored, the Sky Pavilion could come crashing down on the Poképark, destroying it and all who inhabit it. Mew tells us that 14 special Pokemon hold the 14 prism pieces, and we must get them back. But like, couldn't they just give you it? You know who they are, right? After somehow surviving this fall, Pikachu wakes up in an empty forest. Oh, Jesus! Chatot, the self-proclaimed PokéPark guide, wakes us up and welcomes us to the tutorial area. Here we are Chatot's guinea pig, and we are faced with many challenges, such as... You've lost me. Dash into this crate. Okay, sure, I'm sure this is a good idea! Jump over this log? No! Oh shit, they're onto us. Here we have our final and most challenging test. Casual assault! Well, that was way more fun than it should have been. Finally, we've entered the heart of the Poképark and are welcomed by this beautiful introduction to our new surroundings, the Meadow Zone. You see, this game consists of 9 zones, each one being a fairly large open playground with a boatload of Pokemon from the first 4 generations in them, and each one having its own set of story beats that help move the overall plot forward. Let's start with the Meadow Zone. We waddle on up to Bulbasaur, who promptly tells us that he has direct orders from Starlin 2.0 to not allow anyone to play the attractions, and to keep the Meadow Zone on lockdown. Being the Pokemon rights activist he is, Pikachu swiftly decides to ignore this rule and play the attraction. Now, attractions are basically quick, bite-sized minigames. If the name of the game didn't already make this explicitly clear, this game is on the Wii, which means that the minigames consist of a whole lot of... one quick pump of dopamine and a congratulatory jingle later, and we are met by law enforcement. Mangi and Trico tell us how naughty we've been, and steal our vegetable. This animation is far funnier than it should be. The next point in Pikachu's character arc is to fight the law. Noted. Trico, Mankey, Croagunk and Spearow are Venusaur's evil henchmen, and we must take them down. Trico will let us cross the bridge if we befriend Turtwig, and he gets the bonus on Bulbasaur's attraction. And look out guys, we have a speed shamer over here. He shall be hung, drawn and quartered! Now remember how I said traditional turn-based battling and catching Pokemon don't return in this game? Well, this is their replacement. In order to make friends with the Pokemon, you must compete in a skill game with them. This can be one of 4 things: chase, wherein you dash into the Pokemon, a battle, wherein you dash into or thunderbolt the Pokemon to deplete their health, or drown them! Hide and seek, wherein... Come on, I don't have to explain what hide and seek is, do I? Or a quiz, wherein the Pokemon will ask you 3 questions. Sometimes about Pokemon, sometimes about the PokéPark, or sometimes whatever topic they pull out of their ass. What is your name spelled backwards? I don't know, I'm not a physician! The former 2 have more intense music for trickier foe, who can be taken down easier if you upgrade Pikachu's abilities, and I actually really enjoy these variations. And they do make the challenges seem genuinely tense. So, we befriend Turtwig by hitting him with the force of a 2-ton train, and watch him tumble his way into a hospital bed. This is honestly one of the funniest parts of the game for me. Sending Pokemon flying with the slightest tap into them, it's particularly funny with bigger Pokemon. But some don't take too kindly to it. And others turn into frisbees. We head back to Wagglefest 09 and score some sweet, sweet berries with our favourite cripplingly slow turtle. Trico doesn't approve of this, but holds up his end of the bargain. Mankey, on the other hand, is a simple man. He wants a fight and that's it, so you know what that means. Drown him! Krogunk is diagnosed with gluttony as he takes 200 of your berries! Berries are essentially this game's point system. You get berries for competing in skill games with other Pokemon, making friends, and if you achieve the bonus on an attraction. They can be traded in for things later on, and are also used as the currency to play attractions. After his robbery, Krogunk decides to battle you. Your theft and gluttony shall not go unpunished! Drown, heathen! Spearow has the most interesting challenge, being an obstacle course. I win games, I'm above the law! We head back to Venusaur with a kill count of 4 and he admits defeat, giving us back our vegetable. We would be free to go if Veggie didn't start yapping and Venusaur challenges us to his attraction as punishment for her insolence. I will put you in a salad. This minigame is slightly different. We instead have to... Clearing the goal brings on a spout of existentialism, as Venusaur reveals why he had such strict rules on the Meadow Zone. Will there be heartbreak, action, romance? Find out next time on PokéPark Wii. Venusaur reveals that he and the other Zone Keepers have feuded about the fate of the PokéPark. Our victory sparks a change in heart, however, and he grants us the freedom to leave the Meadow Zone. Alright, my wagony was justified! He sends us off with a message for his fellow gatekeepers, and we set off to restore order in the PokéPark. With more casual assault and drowning! We head off to the meeting place, which is as close to a hub world as this game will get, and honestly, putting hub world and this game in the same sentence makes me gag. The meeting place holds the gates to the remaining zones in the game with a solid asterisk there. Most of the zones. But we'll get into that later. It also houses a giant fucking tree. The story in the rest of the zones boils down to a slight variation of the Meadow Zone Venusaur saga. So instead of spending the next hour painstakingly detailing the story of each zone, allow me to introduce you to them all and give you a basic rundown of the story in each. The Beach Zone, a sun-drenched tropical paradise with some bopping tunes and enough vibes to sustain the full Pokédex. Here, Empoleon has retreated to the Iceberg Zone after his feud with Venusaur, and Feraligatr and Gyarados are left to their own measures. They fought an epic battle that is all told and none saw, and they destroyed the bridges, leaving Piplup and Wynot stranded. Gyarados has declared himself the ruler of the Beach Zone, and Feraligatr simply watches in defeat. After dealing with the tropical bootlegs of Trico and Mankey, Carvanha and Sharpedo, we rebuild the bridges both physically and metaphorically, curve stomp Gyarados' superiority complex, and break through to Lapras Cove. Lapras is our one and only entry point to the next zone, and we travel there on her back, on a courageous voyage across the sea. This cutscene is one of the main reasons Lapras is one of my favourite Pokemon. God, what is it with me and falling in love with characters through cutscenes? The Iceberg Zone, a glimmering, frozen tundra with a chilled atmosphere and some really calm music. The Zonekeeper Empoleon has barricaded himself in a frozen gate, and the only Pokemon with the power to break through the barrier is Mamoswine. Unfortunately, He has been frozen solid across a giant lake. It is our job to recruit Glalie and Frostlass, freeze the lake, and free Mamoswine to help us deliver our message to Empoleon. The Cavern Zone, a dark, dingy mineshaft with rails and minecarts around every corner. One of the rails is missing, however, and it's the one leading to the lava zone, where we need to go. Of f***ing course! We are tasked with finding the rail so that we can continue our quest. We find out that a lot of local rejects are in cahoots, and destroyed the rail intentionally. We find this out from Aaron after satiating his kink for iron ore. He's so horny. Mawile, Dugtrio and Diglett play musical chairs with the rail and send us on a wild goose chase that culminates in us having to wake up a sleeping Snorlax. Satiate his kink for gluttony, and finally get a hold of the rail, whilst also returning the beloved hot spring to the zone. Now all that's left to do is enjoy our minecart ride to our next destination, which is the Lava Zone, a smouldering sauna of fiery intensity that is, thankfully, quite light in the story department. Here we simply show our strength against the many hothead inhabitants, fix the switches by mining ore and taking the walk of shame. The talk all know what you did. Once the switches are fixed, we can eliminate the spires of flame that block our way. We reunite with Charmander and pass on Venusaur's message to the final recipient. After our volcanic venture, we return to the meeting place, where we find a hot air balloon and a message from Mew. Piplup is perplexed about the possible placement of the Poke Pavilion and attempts to get the hot air balloon up and running. It fails. It's too holy. Then Misdreavus tells us that Miss Magius knows where it is, and she's in the Haunted Zone, so f*** it, off we go. The Haunted Zone. A secluded, haunted manor deep within a dingy forest, with an atmosphere topped off with a purple full moon looming over the house. Completing Tangrowth's attraction grants us access to the manor, where we are greeted by Duskull, our guide. He gives us a tour of the mansion, showing us the many hallways, and the library, which we may not enter, and the hall, which we may not enter. I've never felt so welcome. No, only the cool kids who beat Dusknoir's attraction are allowed to party in the hall. After telling us how much of a reject we are, Duskull swiftly gives up on the tour and Gusty takes over, and shows us around the upper floor of the manor. Gusty isn't a judgmental prick, however, and opens all the doors upstairs. We find a painting of Gengar, and then suddenly some very ominous bells begin to chime, and the painting threateningly informs us that we really have something to brag about in the spirit world. Thank you? Dusknoir appears, and after crumbling under peer pressure we complete his attraction, gaining access to the hall, where all the cool parties happen. But the piano's broken. Of f***ing course! This is why Miss Magius has barricaded herself in the library, which is why we can't enter. Misdreavus tells us that Spinnerack's thread should be enough to fix the piano, and it's our job to fix it. After doing so, Miss Magius comes out of hiding, granting us access to the rest of the house. We learn that Rotom has gone missing, and there is a suspicious book-shaped hole in the wall of the library. In classic Scooby-Doo style, a secret door opens up and we find Rotom. Miss Magius tells us what we need to know and off we go. Upon returning to the meeting place, Piplup tells us that we are now able to fly the hot air balloon. There's a sudden earthquake and Scorpy suspects that it may have been something to do with the Granite Zone. Let me guess. Yep, let's go. The Granite Zone, a complex combination of desolate ruins and marble-moving mechanisms that houses only the most powerful Pokemon. Charizard informs us that the ruins are going to test us and prepare us for the Sky Pavilion. Absol tells us of the power of the Sky Pavilion over the PokéPark. He tells us that because of the ground shaking and the loss of the rainbows in the sky, there must be something wrong with the pavilion. Hoppip grants us access to the ancient moving mechanisms, allowing us to get to different parts of the zone. Flygon introduces us to the Promise Gate, and tells us that we need to get 3 special words to pass through. So we complete a platforming challenge to open more rooms. Am I even playing the same game? Porygon Z, yes Z, not Z, and Togekiss give us 2 of the words, and then we have to do everyone's favourite thing in gaming, backtracking! We need to go back to the Cavern Zone and ask Snorlax for the 3rd word, because he is such a wise prophet. The words are love, peace and rainbow, and with this preachy password we can pass through the gate and head closer to our destination. The Flower Zone, quaint, quiet, tranquil, an extension of the ruins that have been taken over by nature, and greenery and flowers have sprouted. Shaman tells us that the mirror they would need to help us get to the Sky Pavilion is missing, and Mareep asks us to find it in Rayquaza's absence. Get ready for more backtracking because we're headed back to the meeting place to find it. Retrieve it and head back to the Flower Zone to return it to its place. The mirror shoots out a beam of light that attracts Rayquaza. He tells us that in order to reach the Sky Pavilion, we must complete every attraction. After completing his attraction, we talk to Shaman, who throws in another arbitrary hurdle. They can't guide us unless the Gracidea flower is blooming. Sure. Blossom gives us a watering can that can make the flower bloom miraculously, allowing Shaman to transform into their sky form. The Hot Air Gang arrive and we are whisked away to to our final destination. The Sky Pavilion, the fabled stomping grounds of the mythical Mew, the very location our entire journey has been building up to. Here we have only one goal: talk to Mew. We give him all of the prison pieces that we have collected from each of the attraction hosts throughout our adventure. But that's not good enough, apparently. Yes, Mew decides that we need to have a showdown, an ultimate test of will and strength to bring us just a smidge more of friendship to the PokéPark. This really is a test of everything we've done so far. We have an obstacle hop, a 3-part battle where Mew transforms into Magmortar, Garchomp and Tyranitar, and ends off with the chase to end all chases. But I guess quizzes aren't important, so that's cool. Using all our might, we best Mew, and we are finally able to restore the Sky Prism, and the PokéPark is saved. This ends in an amazing flyby of all the zones we've visited, and this one really hits me right in the feels. Seeing all of the places we visited is a heartwarming experience. And there you have it. There's a brief summary of this game's story. Now, this game is a game from my childhood, so if you'd allow me just a moment to gush about how much I love it, that'd be much appreciated. This game is absolutely gorgeous. Sure, on a technical level this won't win any awards. I mean, come on, it's on the Wii for Christ's sake. But artistically and stylistically, every single zone oozes charm out of its ears. The backgrounds are detailed and interesting, and there is rarely a time when I see a background area that I don't want to visit. Speaking of visiting, this might be the 5-year-old within me speaking here, but this place is somewhere that I've dreamt of visiting for many a year. I have memories in each and every zone, but for the sake of being concise, I'll talk about just one. The Haunted Zone. Man, oh man, what a treasure. However, when I was younger, this place was the pinnacle of piss-stained pants. I was terrified of this zone and genuinely freaked out at every twist and turn. I was so scared that I did the absolute bare minimum to progress the story and left, never to return. Everything about it scared me. I hated it. But now, I can say with confidence that this is my favourite zone. The music and overall atmosphere are to die for. I really love it. Now let's slide the nostalgia gogs off and talk about the many glaring issues with this game. That's right, I said it, this game isn't perfect. What are you gonna do? Number 1, the controls. You've been watching gameplay of this game and no doubt imagined it controlling fairly well, but oh no, we have to play with this, and Jesus Christ, just looking at this makes me feel faint. Ah yes, the Wii Remote. The perfect controller for anything but an open space 3D game. The nunchuck isn't even an option. Why? Like, yeah, the game has some motion controls, but too many to do with the nunchuck attached? By me asking this, you already know the answer. Number 2, the music. This one really isn't a complaint, more of a slight gripe. The music in this game is phenomenal, but it plays in small chunks with large empty gaps in between them. To better illustrate my point, allow me to play you an unedited sample of one of the game's many tracks. Now, admittedly, this isn't a problem in-game. There are so many other things for our ears to focus on, such as other random instrumentations or hilariously derpy Pokemon cries. A personal favourite of mine being Raichu's. Excellence in audio form. And my final, biggest complaint with this game is the completion method. When you befriend a Pokemon, their name is written in your PokéPark pad. To best friend them and see them with a rainbow book next to their name, you must play another skill game with them. This is mildly tedious, but when considering it needs to be done with every Pokemon, can work out as a minute pain in my rectum. But the Pokemon roaming around the zones aren't the only ones to friend. Oh no, we also have the legendaries. The legendaries are a fairly well kept secret, as is the way of befriending them. But when you do find out what you have to do, you'll run faster than a Rapidash on catnip! In order to befriend a legendary, you must achieve the bonus in every single attraction with every single Pokemon! No, I'm not doing it! This culminates in hours and hours of grinding, playing the same attraction again and again and again, and some of the attractions are utter atrocities to play. Wingle's Circle Circuit is the bane of my existence. The tilt controls always send you in anything but the direction you want it to go in, and reaching the goal with the easy Pokemon is damn near impossible. And I still f***ing did it! The worst part is you get nothing, naught, jack diddly squat for doing it all. It's a massive waste of time and energy. But it could be argued that thus is the nature of video games. And hey, would you look at that, I've completed my training. I've been making notes along the way, and I now know everything I need to do when I'm out and about. Fight or chase anyone I come into contact with, repeat until they are my best friend, take their money as a penalty for losing to me, and use them as meat shields in situations I don't want to deal with. Yeah, I think I'm ready. Sequels can be pretty nerve-wracking as a fan of any piece of media. Sure, they can give you more of what made you fall in love with it in the first place, but they can also be worse in every conceivable way. Sequels like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze take the good elements of its predecessor and enhance them tenfold, whilst also removing any issues that its predecessor may have had. Whereas sequels like Chibi Robo Ziplash strip away everything that made that predecessor beloved to begin with. A bad sequel doesn't necessarily have any sort of impact on the games that came before it. A string of bad sequels can give a certain series a reputation, but a bad sequel can also help nurture more of an appreciation for what we had before it. But when it comes to a game or series that you love, a bad sequel can be devastating. So, considering how much of my personality is made up of my adoration for PokéPark Wii, the mere existence of this game terrifies me. I have never played PokéPark 2, partly because I only got it 2 Christmases ago, but also partly because of a deep-rooted fear that this game wouldn't live up to the original. But that changes today. Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk. My time has come. It's finally time for me to play the sequel to one of my favourite games of all time. I didn't know numbers could give me this much anxiety. Why yes, Christ did get a sequel! Was it any good? PokéPark Wii is one of those games. One of the games that the general public looks at and says, ew. While I look at it and say, get in my f***ing pants! PokéPark Wii is a great game. It's a simple, cute adventure that absolutely oozes charm, and offers a unique serenity that not a lot of other games in the Pokemon series ever have. To me, this game is pure escapism, a portal into a gorgeous, consequence-free world of pure, uncomplicated fun, accompanied with some stunning vistas along the way. Of course, nobody agreed. Even at the time of its release, this game received pretty negative reviews, most citing not enough content, not enough depth, not enough fun. And hey, while I obviously disagree with this, I can't even say that these reviewers were necessarily wrong. If you're looking for something on the level of mainline Pokemon games, this game would probably disappoint you. I don't like the mainline Pokemon games though, so I thought this was f***ing great! This game reportedly sold 1.25 million units, which is definitely decent for a game of its type, but compared to the tens of millions the franchise is used to, that seems pretty low. So when you combine that with the pretty poor reviews, how the f*** did this happen? PokéPark 2, released on March 23rd, 2012 here in the UK. Oh, sorry, PokéPark 2 Wonders Beyond, because Pokemon Black and White were the newest mainline games at the time, so they took their initials and pulled a sneaky on us. Upon release, this game also managed to garner pretty mixed reception, for a lot of the same reasons as the first game, so who knows? Maybe I'll end up loving this game after all. PokéPark 2 opens up in hell, where legendary Pokemon Reshiram and Zekrom are discussing a great disaster that is sure to bring an end to the PokéPark, and that their only hope of salvation is one tiny light that might hope to end the disaster,
You know, light-hearted shenanigans, as we should expect. We then cut to Pikachu, who is meeting back up with Piplup to return to the PokéPark. But Charmander and Chikorita are nowhere to be found. After the whole being pushed into a void situation, it seems fair that Pikachu would reevaluate their friendship status. The game takes us through all of the tutorials that the first game did, and quite frankly, I found this offensive.
Bitch, do I look like I need your tutorials?
After that, we get a nice little introduction to all of the PokéPark and all of the locales we'll be exploring in this adventure. When we arrive in the PokéPark properly, we notice a bunch of people creaming themselves about the Wish Park, and not being ones to not conform, Pikachu and Piplup follow the crowd to see what all the fuss is about. Along the way, we're interrupted by Oshawott, who has nothing of note to say, but I'll allow it because he's one of my top 3 favourite Pokemon. Look at him. I love him. Anyway, we head to the Wish Park through this fun portal, only to discover that things here are I mean, the creepy dollhouse music and the purple aura emanating from this place should have been a giveaway, as should the fact that the people running it are the Gothita evolutionary line and Cofagrius. But what really sells us on that idea is a motion-controlled minigame.
Oh, you sick bastards!
The main attraction here is Cofagrigus' cake, and before you make a Google search even Jesus wouldn't forgive you for, I'm obligated to tell you that I'm referring to a minigame in which you have to try and make as many cakes as possible within a time limit. And your prize for doing so is being able to eat the cakes. But, turns out, the cakes are having some pretty wacky effects on the Pokemon who eat them, seeming to put them under some form of hypnosis, and after we realize this, Cofagrigus drops the facade and straight up tries to force this cake upon us, before, oh hey, Oshawott's back. As if our day wasn't going miserably enough, these giant demon hands appear from the sky, and we have to try and outrun them to return safely to the PokéPark, but Piplup is too slow and sacrifices himself to save Pikachu and Oshawott. If you ever feel bad about the choices you make, just remember you could always be sacrificing yourself for a fucking Pikachu. So, our quest becomes clear. We have to try and save Piplup from the Wish Park, whilst unraveling the mysteries of what is actually going on there. But we can't do it alone. Not only do we need the power of friendship, as firmly established by the first game and every anime known to man, but we also need the help of Oshawott, who joins Pikachu on his quest as a playable character. Look at him. I want to be him. For the first time in the PokéPark series, we get to explore the world as someone other than Pikachu. Sure, we got to play as our friends in the attractions in the first game, but here we get to play as Oshawott any and everywhere our hearts desire, which is really cool. Not only because Oshawott is an objectively better Pokemon than Pikachu, but also because he has unique abilities, which I'll touch on more later. Now, Oshawott works for Samurott, and their joint goal is to protect the Pokemon of the Cove area, and a large part of this mission involves rescuing the many Pokemon who have entered the Wish Park and never returned. We head into town to interrogate Sandile and Krookodile, who were the ones rallying the Pokemon to the Wish Park in the first place, and we learn that in order to open the portal to the Wish Park, you simply have to wish for it to open. Damn, I don't even need a shooting star! We return to the Wish Park to confront Cofagrigus properly. He says the spell everyone is under will only be broken if the bell rings. And the bell will only ring if we can defeat him, which leads to us playing his new and improved attraction, destroying his cake, and eventually us battling him. There's a lot to unpack here. So, the attractions here are a bit different to the ones in PokéPark Wii. Rather than being quick, bite-sized minigames, these are a bit more lengthy and a bit more involved. Or at least as involved as motion-controlled minigames can be. This sounds like an improvement, and on the surface, it is! But it comes with a cost. Before heading back to Wish Park, I was sure to make a lot of friends all over the beach, as the first game taught me that Pikachu isn't always the best Pokemon to handle the attractions. And for something like making the most cakes, I have to imagine a Pokemon like Frillish or someone would be better equipped. So let's just pick them for this minigame. Oh no. In the attractions, you only get to play as one of the 4 playable characters, because yes, spoiler alert, there are 2 more. I wonder who they could be. You aren't able to play as any of the friends you've made out in the PokéPark. So what the f*** was the point in making those friends to begin with? Well, I'll tell you what the point was. This shit's the point. In order to have enough wish energy, I guess, to open up the Wish Park, you have to enlist the help of your friends. That's all they're good for. To open each portal, you need a certain number of friends, so there's your incentive. But once you have enough Pokemon on your side to open the portal, there's next to no point in making new friends anymore. Also, they removed the best friend system that the first game had, wherein challenging a Pokemon to a second, harder skill game would make you best friends, as denoted by a rainbow book in the PokéPark pad. But here? Nah, best friends don't exist. This is reality. And the worst part of all of this is that within the attractions, the 4 Pokemon you can pick from are identical in terms of how they play. On the one hand, this eliminates the strategy involved with picking a Pokemon and trying to make sure you have the best one for the job, which is painfully disappointing. But on the other hand, it makes me less devastated about not being able to play as your friends, because at that point, there'd be no point anyway. This just makes the attractions and the friend-making system feel so shallow and honestly kind of pointless. The attractions here are used for progression, much like in the first game. And after we defeat Cofagrigus, he tells us that there are 3 more areas with 3 more attractions. Let me just give some context so everybody who's not up to speed on PokéPark lore can understand how fucking twisted that sentence was. PokéPark Wii had 8 zones with 14 attractions, whereas this game has 3 zones and 3 fucking attractions.
How? I mean it. How did they this up so badly? The zones and attractions are literally the entire point of the first game. The core gameplay is nice, slow-paced, and relaxed, so the big, luscious environments are designed to take full advantage of that, while offering a lot of visual variety, whereas the attractions exist to offer something a bit more action-packed and a lot more involved to supplement that core gameplay and shake things up every now and then. So how are you going to reduce all of that by an accumulative 70% and have the audacity to call this game a sequel? Okay, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, a bit too knee-jerky. So let's give this game the benefit of the doubt. Let's play through the rest of it and see what else it has to offer. The first zone, or as the game now refers to them, area of the game is the Cove area, where we've spent all of our time so far, which consists of the beach and the town, the latter of which acting as a pseudo-hub world, similar to the meeting place from the original PokéPark. The next area is the Arbor area, which is... it's the fucking Meadow Zone again. This is a luscious forest area, complete with a big windmill, and this is where we meet our third playable character, Snivy. The third area is the Crag area, a mountainous area, and to its credit, this area looks and feels really distinct and honestly, really damn cool. It gives me vibes of Ocarina of Time, weirdly enough, but that's definitely not a bad thing. This is where we meet our 4th and final playable character, Tepig, which, rather predictably, means we get to play as all of the Generation 5 starters. You know, this was actually foreshadowed pretty nicely in the opening. When each area had its little flyover, we see each of these 3 Pokemon running around and are the secondary focus alongside the bird Pokemon that's front and center. And then when we're shown the town area, we see the second stage evolutions of these 3 Pokemon hanging out with Raichu, to symbolize that the 4 Pokemon below them in their respective evolutionary lines are going to team up with each other. And it's also foreshadowed by owning the game literally at all. The final area, of the main game at least, is the tech area, which is by far the coolest one thematically, taking place in a warehouse full of old trains. I genuinely adore this area. Each of the main areas have equivalents in the Wish Park, which is where the 4 attractions are found. And once you've played through these attractions,
that's pretty much the end of the game. So, now that we've talked about everything in pretty broad strokes, let's get into the nitty-gritty specifics, starting with the gameplay. Each of the 4 playable characters play completely differently on the overworld. Pikachu is as basic as ever, but the others offer unique abilities that warrant choosing them over the yellow rat. Being a water-type Pokemon, Oshawott is naturally able to swim, which really allows these worlds to feel a lot more open and free. There's definitely a smaller amount of water in this game compared to the first one, most likely because there's a smaller amount of areas, which does make this ability feel pretty wasted. But it's utilized well enough in the areas that do feature water to make it feel warranted. Snivy is able to run significantly faster and jump significantly higher than the others, making her the uncontested champion of traversal. And Tepig, while being a bit slower than the rest, is powerful enough to break through massive boulders. A lot of this stuff is really situational, especially with Tepig. But just having a reason to pick one character over another made this really fun for me, in all honesty. The game has 2D sections every now and then, which feel like they take advantage of each character's strengths and weaknesses much better in my opinion. And with there now being 4 different Pokemon of 4 different types, the game now introduces type advantages from the mainline games to help add just that little bit of extra strategy to the battles, which alongside all of the other skill games, return from the original game. So on the whole, the gameplay here is probably better than it is in the original. I did notice a lot more floatiness and a bit less precision when it comes to stuff like turning while running, but it wasn't like a huge issue. What is a huge issue though, is the fact that Pikachu no longer does a flip at the peak of his jump. Absolutely unplayable! One thing that really strikes me about this game in comparison to the original is the music. This game has a much more fully orchestrated score, and a lot of the music has a much more grandiose feel to it. And man, I just do not know how I feel about this. For stuff like the title theme and the opening music, this fits incredibly well. But then for places like the beach, which have these epic orchestral scores being juxtaposed against the mundane, more low-key environments, it feels really off. In a lot of cases, the music just doesn't seem to fit. I get that the orchestrated score gives this game an air of significance that the first game arguably lacked, but at least for me, the reason I liked the music so much in PokéPark Wii was because of how unastounding it was. Despite how gorgeous they were, the zones in that game, all things considered, were nothing grand. They weren't a kingdom on the brink of ruin, they weren't a desert plagued by floating pyramids and frigid temperatures. They were just a forest, a beach, a cave. They were uninteresting in the most interesting way possible, and the music felt very fitting for that. Now, of course, areas like the tech area in this game are a lot more grand in terms of spectacle, so the orchestral score fits perfectly there. But when we have another forest and another beach with big booming soundtracks, it just doesn't sit right with me. That's not to say the music is bad at all, far from it. The themes are all really pleasant and catchy, and the battle music in this game is an absolute masterpiece. But on the whole, the music just doesn't feel like it belongs most of the time. But one area where I will 100% praise the music, and hell, the game itself, is the loading screens. God, this restaurant kicks ass! Have you seen their menus? Much like the first game, the loading screens most often feature the playable characters just dicking around, being adorable, and the music is suitably playful in the same way the first game's was. But sometimes, what the characters are doing will change to match what's going on in the story, and as such, the music will change just slightly. It's the same melody, but it changes the pitch and progression of the notes in a way that adds such a layer of tension and uncertainty. It's absolutely fantastic. Could you imagine if they were blue? So, the gameplay and sound design of this game are both a mixed bag, especially when compared to the original, but they're not all that PokéPark 2 has to offer. So, let's talk about the story. Would it surprise you to learn that that's also a mixed bag? PokéPark 2 has a much bigger emphasis on story than PokéPark Wii did. In that game, the only threat was the ambiguous lack of friendship in the PokéPark, which was going to cause the Sky Pavilion to fall and destroy the park entirely, which I actually liked as a narrative device, but this game has more of an actual, tangible threat to the Pokemon, that being Darkrai. He's the one behind the curtains of the Wish Park, and sends out 4 spooky-looking Pokemon to handle the 4 zones within the park, akin to the gatekeepers in the first game. Once we've defeated all 4 of them, we face off against Darkrai, who erases the memories of Oshawott, Snivy, and Tepig, and separates the gang among the PokéPark, which sends Pikachu into what can only be described as a deep depression. This feels pretty dark for a kid's game. It's definitely played up for some semblance of comedic effect, but there's also a lot of sincerity in this scene. It wants you to take it seriously. And I just can't. But it turns out, Piplup is okay! And that fact alone is able to bring Pikachu back to his normal self, and gives him the motivation to go restore the rest of the group. We return to where we befriended each member of the trio, and we rekindle our friendship. We're stronger than ever, and are ready to take down Darkrai. We fight Darkrai twice, and after we defeat him both times, a rift begins to form in the sky, which threatens to devour the entire PokéPark. The only way to put an end to this is for the 4 playable Pokemon to ring each of the 4 bells in the Wish Park. And in a last-ditch attempt of salvation, Darkrai sacrifices himself to close the void, and the PokéPark is saved. This story is honestly pretty decent. It had some genuinely good beats in there, and an honest attempt at heartfelt emotion. The encounters with Darkrai kind of outstay their welcome, and the whole void thing feels pretty forced, but on the whole, I enjoyed this plot. And then it kept going. Yeah, contrary to what most people who've played this game may believe, the game doesn't end with the credits. Figuring that Darkrai's sacrifice makes him worthy of being befriended, the gang head to a couple of new sub-areas throughout the park in order to befriend Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus, who are able to transport us to where Reshiram and Zekrom reside. Both legendaries agree that Darkrai doesn't deserve to be freed from his fate, but are willing to hear us out if we're able to defeat them in battle. And once we do so, Darkrai is saved, and the game is truly over. That was a whole bunch of padding. Look, it's cool that we get to work alongside these legendary Pokemon, and the redemption of Darkrai is narratively pleasing, but the way in which we get to that point just feels fine.
So that was PokéPark 2, the direct sequel to one of my favorite games of all time. I don't know how I feel about this game.
On the one hand, it removes a lot of what I enjoyed so much about the original game, and downplays certain elements in a way that feels objectively worse than the way the first game handled them. But on the other hand, it does introduce a lot of things that I really enjoyed, and that add a lot of depth to the adventure. As a game on its own, this game is honestly really good. It's definitely not to everybody's taste, but I am obviously not everybody.
I enjoyed my time with this game, and looking at it in a vacuum, I'd be pretty happy to recommend other people to play it. But I don't get to look at this game in a vacuum. The whole time I was playing this game, all I could think of was, man, PokéPark Wii did this so much better. PokéPark Wii had a much more interesting approach to this. PokéPark Wii was just more fun. I can say with no uncertainty that I vastly prefer the original. But that doesn't mean that PokéPark 2 is inherently bad. It's a good game, and I really like it. But compared to PokéPark Wii, it can be woefully disappointing. It's underwhelming as all hell as a sequel, but great as a game on its own, and because of that, I think I'm always gonna have pretty mixed feelings about this game. But at the end of the day,
I'm glad I finally played this game. And who knows, maybe the same could be said if I play the sequel to another one of my favourite games of all time. Over my dead f***ing body!